करोना करोना ये रोज का रोना, वक्त आ गया अब तो आगे बढ़ो ना। ये हाथों का धोना और परेशान होना, बैठे बैठे ही अपना संतुलन खोना। मेरे मोबाइल को हाथ तो ना लगाना, माशूका का चेहरा मास्क से छुपाना। याद आज भी वो मुलाकात रोजाना, मिलूं अब कैसे, क्या ढूंढूं बहाना। इल्तिजा कोरोना से बंद कर तू सताना, घर के बाहर जो बैठा अब जल्दी तू जाना। कोरोना कोरोना ये रोज का रोना, वक्त आ गया अब तो आगे बढ़ो ना। बीवी के गुस्से से खुद को बचाना, लाजमी उसको है शांत कराना। रहा मेरा कोई भी ना ठिकाना, मिलूं तुझे कैसे, फेस टाइम पे बुलाना। चौपट हो गया मेरा धंधा पुराना, जो पाता था हर माह अब आए सलाना। जिंदगी का है ये किस्सा पुराना, जिम्मेदार होकर जिम्मेदारी निभाना। कोरोना कोरोना ये रोज का रोना, वक्त आ गया अब तो आगे बढ़ो ना।
Kapil sir, I have 4 friends. One of them wants to be an IS officer. One of them wants to be a lawyer. One of them wants to be into politics, and one of them wants to be an artist. So, sir, they are still pursuing their own careers, but you at such a young age have done all the 4 things.
Life is always multidimensional. Nothing is unidimensional. Just look at a human being. He has all kinds of desires. He has a desire to succeed in the profession that he is in. He's also may have great love for nature. He may be desirous of being also a photographer because of his love for nature. Or just, he may be thinking of, through National Geographic, he may just love animals. He loves music. So every human being is at heart multidimensional. And some people realize those dimensions in their lifetime and some people don't.
Sir, on that note, I would like to welcome you to our episode. So, sir, I want to start by asking you about your childhood when you were in Jalandhar. So, how was your childhood as a child?
I don't know what happened because I was born there.
Okay.
And my eyes opened to the world only when I went to Shimla.
Okay.
My father shifted to Shimla because we had lost everything in Lahore. We were refugees. And my father was the only earning member of the family. So I was born at home in Jalandhar, not our home. We had no home. Then my father shifted to Shimla and started practice all over again. He was a lawyer in Lahore. And my early memories of childhood are associated with Shimla only. So I remember nothing about Jalandhar.
But sir, how were you as a child when you were growing up in school?
I was exceptionally naughty.
Okay.
Indisciplined. Never wanted to study. Was an outdoor boy, always out. Cricket, watching birds, running here and there. Not listening to my teacher. Occasionally, not occasionally, often being punished. That's the way I was.
And so then, how has been the influence of your parents on your life?
Enormous. Enormous. From my father, I learnt the art of being generous. From him, I learnt the significance of dedication. From him, I learnt love of literature. From him, I learnt the right and the duty to fight and the right to stand for what you believe in. From him, I learned that there is no success without adventure. Nothing ventured, nothing won. From him, I learned the love for literature, the beauty beyond the law. And from my mother, I learned the importance of bringing up a family with complete dedication. That's how I grew up.
And so then after that, when you went to college, you were in St. Stephen's. So how was your experience?
From an outdoor man, I became an indoor man.
Okay.
I had great love for theatre. So I did a lot of theatre in college. And I also got more interested in studies. So I spent a lot of time trying to excel. I also dabbled a bit in college politics.
Okay.
Within the college, we had a kind of a parliament. And I remember in my first year itself, I got the highest number of votes to be in what was called the criterion. So from an outdoor child, I became an indoor person and started concentrating on academics. And that sort of commitment to academics grew stronger as I moved up the ladder. So by the time I did post-graduation, I was deeply, deeply involved in academics. And then I also taught in the university.
Okay, you were a teacher. I think so you taught in Hindu also?
I taught in Hindu college, though I studied from St. Stephen's. But I taught in Hindu for 3 years. But while I taught, I did my law. I joined the faculty and did my law. And that happened from 1969 to 1972. Then I sat for the IAS in 1972, I was selected for the IAS as well. So I had a career in teaching, which was ongoing. I was selected for the IAS. And I'd also done my 3 years course in law. So I had 3 professions that I could choose from.
Sir, after you became an IAS officer, I remember, then you decided that you want to be a full-time lawyer.
No, I always wanted to be, quite frankly. The reason why I sat for the IAS was because my father told me that, look, I have 3 elder brothers. I am the youngest in the family.
Oh.
2 of them had got into the IAS. One was allotted Haryana cadre, the other was allotted Madhya Pradesh. And the third one got into the Foreign Service. So my father told me, why don't, even if you don't want to do it, sit for the exam. At least you will not feel that you could not succeed in getting into the service. Because at that time, you know that it was a big thing to be selected in the IAS. It was a very coveted government job because private sector was not so expansive. It didn't offer the kind of jobs that are available now. So in that context, I sat, but I never wanted to. Okay. Nor did my father, because he told me there's no point you're joining the IAS now that you've got in. You should do law. So, that was also the way my mind was thinking about my future life.
And then you came in the profession. So how has your experience been as a lawyer? If there is some interesting anecdote or some very interesting incident which has stayed with you?
Sure, it's been a roller coaster ride. God has been very kind. My colleagues have been wonderful to me. I have always fought for the underdog all my life. Not that I've not been briefed by big corporations, but my heart is with those who have been or who are subjected to state discrimination or targeted by the state, I've always wanted to plead their causes. Because my philosophy in life is that the state is a monolith. The state is all powerful. And we citizens of the country, if we get on the wrong side of the state, its power can destroy us, as we see around in our country even now. And if people in this profession, because it's not a business, it's a service profession, if we don't stand up for their causes, I don't think we should be in the profession. If we always fight for the big guns and the big corporations and the state, I think you develop the same kind of sensibilities as the state has when it deals with its citizens. So I think it's important. That's why we say do pro bono work. Fight for those who don't have access to justice. I think that's very important because that's at the heart of the very foundation on which the profession stands. And the conscience of a lawyer should prick the lawyer when he knows that somebody is not being dealt with fairly.
Oh, that's very true. So, sir, is there anything which you would like to suggest to the budding lawyers who are joining the profession? Right?
See, yeah, lots of people ask me, what's the recipe for success? And I always tell them, there is no recipe. There's no recipe for success. There are different recipes that will ultimately result in success. And that all depends on your own personality. But there are some do's and some don'ts without which you cannot be a successful lawyer. What are the do's? Always be honest with the court. Always read your brief and be thorough. Remember, this is the only profession in the world where you are on equal footing with the counsel opposing you, as well as the judge. Why? Because you have the same brief, you have the same record, the same papers, right? So if you have the same papers, it's not like in a cricket match, there's a swing bowler, right? And there's a googly bowler, and there's a left arm slow bowler and a right arm slow bowler. That doesn't happen in law. You have the same material which the opposite side has. So the key is to be so completely familiar with your material, both on facts and law, that you can actually persuade the court to decide in your favor. In that sense, even a young lawyer is on an equal footing with a senior lawyer, because the senior lawyer may have an advantage of age, but you may be better prepared. No other profession in the world gives you that sense of equality as the profession of law does. So if you are fully prepared with your brief, both on facts and law, you can succeed no matter how renowned the lawyer on the other side is. That's my advice. Be fully prepared, be honest with the court, never tell a lie, never misstate a fact. Always be reasonable. Remember, no judge likes an argument which is unreasonable. Right? Just as no human being likes a demand which is unreasonable. Right? So never be unreasonable with the court, also not unreasonable with the opposing counsel. Always dress cleanly and well, because it gives the judge the feeling that you are meticulous both in your submissions as well as in your dress. Right? Always be polite. You can never win an argument with anger. So always be polite both to the court and to the counsel. But never be afraid. if you are right, don't get overawed. Don't get buckled down by the fact that there's a judge of the Supreme Court who is telling you that you're wrong. And but 99% of success is because of perspiration, and 1% is inspiration. Also, know your judge before whom you are pleading. Because each judge, remember, like each human being is different, each judge is different. Some of them have certain idiosyncrasies, some of them have certain predilections, some of them approach a matter in a particular way, some of them like you to argue in a particular way. So without knowing the judge, you can never be a successful lawyer, because you should know what the judge likes and what he doesn't like. Right? So but then of course, none of this will result in success. And part of it is fate. You may never get the right case at the right time for you to make a mark. But you will get a case for you to make a mark. But sometimes it doesn't happen. So there are many, many competent lawyers who, unfortunately, for reasons beyond their control, have not risen to the levels of success that they are capable of rising. So I don't know how one can be a successful lawyer, because there's no recipe. But these are certain ingredients in the lawyering profession that we must remember as we move along.
It's like if you have to be successful, preparation has to meet opportunity.
Remember, sometimes you may feel that justice was on your side, and yet you lost the case. That should not result in despair, because many a times, and I will hopefully one of these days write about them, many a times cases are decided for reasons that will never be known to you. And you may feel for years to come that, look, there was no reason why the judge should have decided this way. That will happen. Those are great disappointments as you move along. Because judges have their own ways of doing things, and some of them are inscrutable. So that's one thing that, I want to tell young lawyers. And I have episodes where the judges have privately, after retirement, told me why they decided a matter in a particular way when I should have succeeded. And some of them have come to me and said, you should have succeeded, but this is the reason why you did not succeed, which had nothing to do with the law.
Sir, also I want to ask you, after this, what made you decide that you want to venture into politics?
Now, politics was an accident, albeit, retrospectively, a pleasant one. It was an accident because I never imagined that I would be in politics. And I remember that it was Lalu Prasad Yadav who brought me into politics, surprisingly. The reason is that as I attained some element of success in the profession, I happened to represent perhaps most of the politicians in this country, big leaders. And in that context, that this accident happened, because I was defending Lalu Prasad. And many of these matters I used to do pro bono. And I remember Sitaram Kesri was at that point in time the president of the party. And it was Mr. Yadav who said to me that, look, I'll bring you to Rajya Sabha in 1998. But remember, before that, in 1996, I fought my first Lok Sabha election. which also was an accident.
Okay.
The accident was in 1993. I represented Justice V. Ramaswamy in the famous impeachment proceedings. And I got this opportunity, a rare opportunity to address Parliament without being a member of Parliament. Narsim Rao ji was then the Prime Minister of India. And after the impeachment proceedings did not succeed, and then between 1993 and 1996, there were these, you must remember, there was this Hawala scandal.
Yes.
Hawala case, where a lot of ministers across the political spectrum were allegedly involved. I was the counsel for S.K. Jain. That's why it's called Jain Hawala. We ultimately succeeded in the Supreme Court, also in the High Court. But since Narsim Rao ji had heard me in Parliament defending Justice Ramaswamy, suddenly I got a call from him. And I think the reason for the call was a good friend of mine, Mr. Dwivedi, who became the Additional Solicitor General of India, who was very fond of me. R.K. Dhawan ji was supposed to get a ticket from South Delhi. But Narsim Rao took a policy decision that no Hawala, all those involved in Hawala, in the allegations made in the Hawala scam, will not be given tickets. R.K. Dhawan was one of them. He was the candidate for South Delhi. So suddenly overnight he was denied a ticket. They didn't have a candidate. Dwivedi ji suggested it to Narsim Rao. Narsim Rao, having seen me in Parliament, picked up the phone and rang me up about a week before the election and said, you go and stand in South Delhi. Now, I said to him, I'm not a politician. I'm a lawyer by profession, and why do you want me to stand? Because I will lose, because I knew from South Delhi, the opposing candidate, do you know was whom?
No, sir.
Sushma Swaraj.
Okay.
And I said to him, look, you're throwing me into the lion's den. I'm going to lose, so why do you want to? He said, I know you will lose, but you have to fight. That's how I got into politics. So when I lost 1996, I got 1,80,000 votes, and she got 3 lakhs. Right? It's not a bad showing. But anyway, I lost. And then when the 1998 election came around, I wanted to fight the Lok Sabha election because, defeat hurts. Any form of defeat hurts. And you always want to challenge defeat with the sort of commitment that next time you will succeed. So I decided to fight the 1998 Lok Sabha election. When I was expressing this to Lalu Prasad Yadav ji, who was at my home in Maharani Bagh, where I was staying then, he said, no, please don't fight. I will give you Rajya Sabha.
Okay.
So, politicians are politicians, and seldom do they keep their promises. So, I didn't fight Lok Sabha, but I never thought that I would get into Rajya Sabha till about 2-3 weeks before, not even 2-3 weeks, 1 week before the election to the Rajya Sabha from Bihar. He rings me up and said, हम तो सुबह से आपसे फोन करे जा रहे हैं, आप बहुत लेट सोते हो, आप बहुत लेट नाइट करते हो. So I said to him, no, बताइए. He said, हमने आपको बोला था कि आपको राज्यसभा भेजना है, तो आप आइए जरा. आप इतना लेट नाइट मत कीजिए और जल्दी से पहुंचिए. I said, साहब हमें टिकट कहाँ से कोई मैं तो आपकी पार्टी से थोड़ी ना लड़ूंगा. I was not willing to stand for the RJD. And the Congress didn't have enough numbers because, as you know, you need a minimum number of votes in the Rajya Sabha to be nominated. And that's based on a formula. So Congress were about 12, 13, 14 votes short. So there was no way the Congress could have won. So I said, then I'll have to ask, Mrs. Gandhi. He said, हमने केसरी साहब से बात कर ली है, वो आपके पक्ष में है. आप मैडम के पास जाइए और उनसे अनुमति लेकर आप जल्दी आइए. So I spoke to Mrs. Gandhi and she was very kind. She said, look, we're not getting a seat on our own. So it's nothing like us that we have you on a Congress ticket. That's how I got into Rajya Sabha in 1998. So these were all accidents of life. Life is full of accidents, some pleasant, some unpleasant. But you have to accept those unpleasant with a smile and accept the pleasant ones with a bigger smile.
That's true. So then in Delhi, when the Chandni Chowk elections happened, can you tell me something about that?
There what happened was that, the Lok Sabha defeat hurt me. And I said, I must fight a Lok Sabha election. Because otherwise it would be, the rest of my life that I have not been able to win a Lok Sabha election. Because Lok Sabha election is something else. You have to deal with people and you have to understand their problems, their tribulations, their everyday challenges. And it humbles you, tells you that no, you're just a lucky man for being where you are. Correct. Right? It's just that you are born lucky. Or your father gave you the paraphernalia and you are where you are because of that. Millions of people in this country, they don't have any opportunities. They don't know how to face tomorrow. That's in fact the tragedy of the human condition. That millions and millions and millions of people live without hope. And the Lok Sabha election teaches you to be humble, to thank God for what you have. So I went to Mrs. Gandhi after my term was to be over in 2004. The election was to Lok Sabha election. I went to her and she said, I said, I want to fight the Lok Sabha election. At that time, I was also the spokesperson of the party, so I was taking on the BJP big time.
Yes, sir.
I said, ma'am, I want to fight. She said, why do you want to fight? You're a Lok Sabha member. You can come back. A Rajya Sabha member, you can get back to the Rajya Sabha. I said, no, I don't want Rajya Sabha. So where do you fight from? You're also a spokesperson. How will you do two things at the same time? I said, ma'am, you let me fight from Chandni Chowk. It's the second smallest constituency. It's in Delhi. So I'll do my, be a spokesperson in the evening, do all the press conferences, and during the day and at night I will campaign. So that's how it happened. And of course, the candidate opposing me was Smriti Irani. And so being an outsider, it was difficult for him in the short while that she was here. But luckily I won. And I won by a record margin. Never happened in the history of Chandni Chowk, the margin with which I won. And then in 2009, I repeated it. I won again. In 2014, the Modi tsunami swept us away.
So, sir, then during your time, I wanted to ask you, how was it like when you were also under Dr. Manmohan Singh? How was he as a Prime Minister?
See, Dr. Manmohan Singh is not a politician. Just as I am not a politician. He was a gentleman politician. And he had great qualities. But the qualities that are necessary to do the kind of things that politicians do, Dr. Manmohan Singh would not do them. To that extent, some people consider that to be a liability. Right? But look at the results that came about during 2004 to 2014. The kind of growth that we never had in the country before. The significance of the private sector. Our exports grew at a, I think, annual rate of 15-16%. Foreign direct investment came in. India became the flavor at Davos. And we got the Indo-US nuclear deal through. That's in the first term. So I think this was, in a sense, a golden period where we've not seen the kind of economic growth and the GDP growth ever before, nor have we seen it after 2014. Our institutions were more transparent and accountable. Right to Information Act. We brought in the Right to Education Act. We brought in Manrega. So there was huge transformation of Indian society, many senses. But of course, as you know, whatever you do, it's not enough. And it will never be. That's the march of civilization. Wherever you are, whichever country you live in, whatever the government does is never enough. Because the aspirational future generation always wants more.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a human tendency.
That's what it is. But he was, according to me, a great prime minister, and despite all the criticism leveled against him, history will judge him as one of the best that we've had.
So when you were the education minister, all of us, our whole team over here, we were, when you had put out CC,
yes,
we were there in class 10th at that time.
Correct.
And sir, according to me, it was definitely a very good reform in terms of, because the concentration from theory had, been shifted to more practical exposure in terms of studies. The focus was not much on board examinations. It was more about how punctual you are, how participative you are in classes. So, sir, what do you think about the education system now?
I think that we are educating our children in all the wrong ways. This is my firm belief. See, the human mind essentially is innovative. Each child is innovative, right? And according to me, each child has some element of genius which is different from the genius of the next child. The purpose of education is not to look at the negative or the weaknesses of the child, but his or her strengths. That can only happen if you recognize that strength. In an education system which is regimented, you can never recognize that strength. So participative education is what is required, which means what? That the teacher must have the ability, the wherewithal, the skills to recognize the strength in each child. Right? That can only happen not through an examination system, but through a collaborative exercise between the child and the teacher. Now, that's missing in the education system, not just here, but many parts of the world. Then, children have to be given the freedom to think. Then only will they be able to realize their dreams, and then only will you be able to realize their innovative qualities. So when I talked about CCE, it was that dialogue between the teacher and the student that I wanted to give an impetus to. But I think the Sangh Parvar thinks otherwise. But ultimately, this will happen. This will happen. You see, how is it that if you look at the history of this great nation, of this civilization, I had not talked, we became a nation much, of this civilization, we were great thinkers, great philosophers, great mathematicians, right?
Inventors.
Great inventors. How is it that that's all stopped after 1947? How is it that we are behind, the world? Why? Because we've not given enough stress to the significance of education and the space for children to realize their dreams. Now, education requires two things. Number one, your physical well-being. If a child doesn't have enough nutrition, if he's stunted, if growth is stunted, how will he realize himself or herself? So health is at the heart, fundamental of education is being a healthy child. There, the issue of nutrition comes in, right? The issue of mother's anemic problem comes in. The issue of environment comes in. Poverty comes in, right? Once you have a healthy child, then the next question is, how can you develop the child's mind? And what are the wherewithals you can provide to him? See, the teacher must not teach, it must guide. Remember, teacher cannot teach. The teacher can only guide. If you solve this problem in this way, this is how it can be solved. You will have children who will say you can also solve it in another way. I've known of students who've said, no, ma'am, this is not the right way, I can solve it in this way. And sometimes those solutions are not even known to the teacher. Right? Look at the beautiful drawings of children that I see nowadays. Look at the access to knowledge through the platforms that we have today, the electronic platform that we have today, has transformed the knowledge base of children, and they are, you can't imagine how extremely knowledgeable they are. But there are millions in this country who have no access to that knowledge.
I think there are only 3% of us who do have that access.
Exactly. So if you don't give access, therefore fundamentally in education, you must give access to knowledge to each child, which is why I had contemplated the concept of Akash, that tablet, in every hand, CCE. This was my concept. I said that digital literacy should be at the heart of education, right? And the child must learn in his own mother tongue. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't emphasize on English, which is an international language. But people think differently. I was thinking of the future of the children of India. If you think that, if you sort of infiltrated with political predilections, you have a problem.
True, sir, that's true. So, as you mentioned about the social media also, when you were also the telecom minister at that time, I remember, you had spoken about regulation of content on social media. And sir, I think it's very relevant today because the thing is, sir,
See, I was called by the New York Times at that time that I oppose free speech. Incidentally, I never said I'll regulate content. That's also wrong.
Okay.
What happened was that was new because the social platforms were new at that time. Google, Facebook, Twitter. I saw some images on social media platforms which, to any sane mind, generated hate and could lead to societal consequences which are exceptionally negative. And I called all the key players on these platforms, and I said, I think in the future, this is going to land us, society, in trouble. Right? Can you find a way of ensuring that such content, I'm not wanting to regulate you. Is there a way to deal with such content?
Correct. And I think, sir, it's very relevant today because people on WhatsApp are sending forwards, which are, which are provoking communal hate. On Facebook, if you remember, in the whole election in US was manipulated in a very bad way.
Remember, every technology, like everything else in life, has two facets. You can use it for growth, use it positively, or you can use the same technology to pander to the worst elements in human thought processes. Take energy, right? You can have children studying with energy, and you can have a nuclear device. You take any technology or any facet of life, and you will find there are two possible ways to deal with it. So also with the social media platforms. They are great aggrandizers of wisdom, right? Where you can access whatever information you want to make you a better human being. I started, for example, very interesting. I wanted to start courses with 3 universities, IIT, Jamia, and Delhi University. I said, let's create a media platform by which the best students of these universities come and do a common course, and we'll give them a common degree. So you can do this in technology and through technology. Now, but those very media platforms can give access to 3 of these universities to pander to all kinds of things.
Correct.
So I was looking at the possibility of the misuse of this platform in a very big way and feared the consequences of it, right? People didn't realize what I was thinking about.
And actually, sir, it's very right what you think.
And attacked me in very unfair terms. And now those very people who attacked me are the ones who are attacking the media platforms.
True.
Right? But that's the way life is. You have to smile when you're criticized.
True, sir. And sir, one more thing I wanted to talk to you about is sedition. What do you think about, I think free speech is very important, and I think constructively criticizing something is a different thing.
You see, all right, let's put this in perspective. What does sedition say? That if by your words spoken, or your acts, or by gestures, you bring the government in contempt. So, sedition relates to acts against the government. Okay? Why against the government? Because it is a colonial law. And the colonial powers did not want anyone to speak against the government.
When Mahatma Gandhi was there.
Mahatma Gandhi, Bal Gangadhar Tilak,
Yes.
Annie Besant, Ali brothers, several others, Maulana Azad. They were all prosecuted for sedition. Gandhi said that it's the worst possible law. It doesn't belong to civilized society.
Sir, I think in UK it was revoked also.
Revoked. The Coroner's Act revoked. Justice and Coroner's Act revoked it. But be that as it may, sedition is qua things stated or done against the state. So even a word spoken against the state, if you bring the state into the government, sorry, not the state, government into contempt, will amount to sedition or may amount to sedition. In 19.1, in Article 19, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to assemble peaceably and without arms, the restrictions can only be done by the state. There's a difference between free speech in 19.1, which can only be restricted by the state. But now free speech is being restricted by the government under sedition laws. Now, the restriction of free speech by government is violative of 19(1)(a) because that restriction can only be done by the state. This aspect has not been fully dealt with by any Supreme Court judgment. That's number one. Number two, if I criticize the government, who will say that I have brought the government to contempt? Only the government. So the government will misuse this law and has been misusing it. Now, at least the kind of misuse that we have seen against politicians who speak against the government, against journalists, against students, whether it's Jamia or JNU, against academics, Elgar Parishad. So you see rampant misuse of this law with only one intent, namely to silence people. And I think I'm very, very proud of the fact that our subordinate judiciary is showing the kind of courage that others have not shown.
That's true. Yes. So what I want to ask you is, it's a little off topic, but how did you get interested into art? Because I've been art in the sense poetry and writing.
Well, I love writing. I do a lot of very serious pieces. But I also write poetry. I've published 2 books of poetry.
Yes, Eyewitness and
The World, My World Within. The 3rd book is coming out this year.
Okay, sir.
But I started also writing poetry in Hindi.
Okay.
And I've been doing that for a long time. Then at some stage I decided to write some lyrics for songs.
You wrote lyrics for Shorgul?
I wrote lyrics for Shorgul. I've also done lyrics for another movie. But I also write, Hindi poetry otherwise. The current state of affairs in the judiciary otherwise. And a lot of very prominent singers have sung for me. I've also launched an album with Rahman.
Yes. Even, sir, I heard your song Ladli, which was, I think, Lata ji.
Yes, that's part of the album of Rahman. Then, people like Arijit, Papon, Hariharan, Lata, Rahman, Shreya Ghoshal, have all sung for me. But most of them are my private collections. I've not sort of made them public. But yes, I enjoy doing that.
And sir, my last question to you is, how do you get so much energy? What is the secret of your energy? Because in the morning you're doing your cases, you're also writing articles.
You see, human beings always have the habit of making excuses when they don't do what they should be doing. Okay? And whenever I find a little time, I'm either writing something or I'm, conceiving something or I'm reaching out to people. In other words, I don't want a minute of my life, except when I'm sleeping, to go waste. So I find time. I think finding time is no issue.
Thank you so much, sir, for being on our show. I hope you had a good time.
Oh, a lovely time. Great talking to you. Thank you very much.